Well, hey everybody, everyone good? Scale of 1 to 10 for your summer. 10 being amazing, 1 being it wasn't a great summer. What would you say? Shout it out.
9.
Oh, Nathan had an off-the-chart summer. Lots of 9s. I think parents are always the happiest ones this time of year, right? Parents are like, well, it's back to school. Unless you're a teacher, maybe. Maybe that's not such. Teachers in the house, Derek, back to school, smiles. It's kind of mixed emotion, as a parent and a teacher. We had a really good summer as a church, kind of a different summer as well. But a couple things I want to highlight as we get started. First, we went on this camping trip. It's our second year doing it over the long weekend. And we went to this campground kind of north of Peterborough, and we rented the group site. Many of you were there, some of you were not. I'm just sharing because it was a great moment. I think there was maybe around 40 of us there on the group site that was supposed to hold maybe 28. They had said there's never been so many people on that group site. And I just want to highlight that on the Saturday of the long weekend, they had this water rig. Now, this is a Christian campground. So we were maybe more unruly than they were expecting. And at the water regatta on the Saturday, they divide this whole campground into different sections and you compete. And they're really cheesy games, but like we came to win. And but the thing we weren't anticipating is that it went on and on, like 3 hours of these games. So probably about an hour and a half in, we kind of tapped out. We're like that group, right? We're like, nah, these games have kind of run their. How many times can you pass a ball under your legs and receive it? And we had done all those games. And as we were walking away back to our group campsite, I heard this lady who was sitting there watching. She's saying, "Oh, good, that group's finally going. Now maybe we'll win something." And I was like, man, you can't help it if we're amazing at camp games, right? Like that was great. So I think that's going to be our tradition. It's our second year doing it, and we'll do it again next long weekend. We also a few weeks ago did a baptism at our friend Ben and Colleen's. We took over their backyard. They weren't even home, and we took over the backyard, and 5 people got baptized. And it was amazing. It's one of those markers for us as a church where people have decided to follow Jesus, and then they want to also say yes to baptism, and in a public way, in community, in a sense of family, say, we belong to this church, this group, and we want to follow Jesus' example and his instruction that as we follow Jesus, we also want to get baptized. And so we had this big pool party, barbecue, baptism, and it was amazing. It was literally so fun. I think looking through a bunch of the pictures we took, if you haven't seen them, they're all up on Facebook, but looking around a bunch of the pictures, one of the things that I love the most is that there was kids and families and people all around the pool sitting or standing, and it was like this big mosh of people who maybe ordinarily you wouldn't necessarily hang out, but because we're following Jesus together and on this adventure, we're all in that place together, and it just makes me feel so excited and so happy. So it was a really, really special time. I hope you had a good summer. Our family, we had a good summer as well. In August, we got a chance to go away for a week to Prince Edward County. I don't know if you've ever been to Prince Edward County, but it's amazing. Near the Sandbanks Provincial Park. Have you guys been there? Anyone been in that area? It's so great. And so we turned a corner as a family where we're not a gaming family. Like we don't play a lot of board games. But we all of a sudden we went into this little town called Picton, and we went to this little kind of goofy shop called Bonkers, which tells you it's a goofy shop, right? And so we went in there and we bought Settlers of Catan. So some of you know this game. So my brothers have this game. We've played it as a extended family sometimes. Tempers always get heated. But we thought, let's just buy it. We've never done that as a family. And we played it that night, and you can only play 4 players. So I think Hadley and Bobby teamed up as a team. But what we discovered is that Hadley is pretty crafty, and she wants to do her own thing. So we realized, well, we know that there's expansion packs for these things. So we went back to Bonkers the next day, bought the expansion pack, only to learn when we got home and tried to set it up that we bought the wrong expansion pack. So we went back to Bonkers. It became this back and forth trip to town extravaganza, trying to figure out how we get this game expanded so we can all play. And it became, I think, the highlight of the week. We maybe of the week we were there played 4 nights. And I may or may not have won the most, but we can ask Bobby that. I did pretty good, so. Anyways, it was so fun. It was one of those highlight kind of things as a family where you all get to play and have like a really sweet time together. And so now that we're back here, this is our first Sunday back. We'll be here every Sunday, 10 a.m. from here until the Christmas zone where we can't come here again because the Nutcracker takes over the building. So we'll do a few other parties and things. We'll keep you posted. But from now on, we're back here at 10 o'clock. And I'm really excited. It feels like a new season. Last year at this time, we were just getting ready to start here. And I remember how nervous and anxious I was feeling. And last night, I kept psyching myself out because I felt, man, I should be more worked up or more nervous. Last year I was like freaked that no one would come. And last night I was excited to see everyone again, but I'm not nervous. I'm just really excited about what this new season represents. And so this is going to be, you know, when you go to class, especially in university, and your first day is like review the syllabus day, that was usually my favorite day of class. So today is going to be kind of like that. We're going to be talking about where we're headed over the next like 8 or 10 weeks, and talk about who we are as a church and where we're going. And so I'm just setting us up. It will be a real easy introduction. And for those of you who are new, it will give you a chance to learn a little bit about who we are as a church and what we sense God has been doing in us and where we sense we're headed. So before I jump into that, maybe we can just pray together, and then I'll share a few thoughts. So Jesus, thank you for this morning. Man, thanks for these friends, new and old. A chance to see some people I haven't seen in a long time. I'm even just reminded of how much I am made for community and we are made for each other. That there's just something about relationship that is just the way you've wired us. And to see people we haven't seen for a while, to share hugs and laughter and stories, it's just part of being human. So thank you for the story we're a part of. Thank you for the things that you are teaching us as a church. We thank you for your faithfulness over the last while. We've made lots of mistakes, and we've also done some things in an okay way, and we celebrate all those things. Jesus, this is for you. We are trying to say, and to be honest, that we're doing our best to follow you, to learn what it means to be disciples and followers of Jesus, and we're trying to do that in the context of friendship through the ups and downs. And so thank you for that real privilege. Thank you that we can read Scripture together, and that the same Spirit that helped those authors pen those words thousands of years ago is present with us, helping us to understand about what these words mean for us today in our context, in our culture. And so we want to have a posture of humility and listening and welcome. So God, teach us, help us to laugh, to learn, to be honest with ourselves, to have a posture of openness as we welcome you here. I recognize in a room this size that there's people who feel very close to you, God, and there's also people who are skeptical or hurt or struggling. And so in the whole spectrum, we just want to say it's okay to be ourselves and that you love us that way. Thank you for the love you demonstrate, the love you give us, and the way you choose to be in relationship and long to be in relationship with us. So God, thank you. So excited for the season ahead. Amen. So let me share a few thoughts here. If you have your Bibles, grab them, flip them to Matthew chapter 5, or grab it on your phone. It's also going to be up here in a second. We're starting this series called The Culture of Us, and we want to talk about who we are as a church, where we're going. Some people may call this like the values you have as a church, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about who we are and what we're up to. So in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus has been hanging around and beginning to teach and to move and to operate. His disciples are around him. And at the very beginning of chapter 5, let me just read this for you. It says this. Verse 1, it says, "One day as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them." So Jesus is noting what's happening around him. This group is forming. So the TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, is happening this week, and some of you will know Mark. I don't think Mark's a different Mark, but you are Mark. This is Mark. Mark is a cop in Toronto, and he hangs out here off and on. He posted this week. You're not a cop, are you, Mark? No, I knew that. Mark's a cop in Toronto, and he posted a picture. Can we bring that up? Where he Mark's the cop in the back right, the guy who looks like he could break you over his knee. He was commenting on all these different celebrities he got to escort around the city for the film festival. So here's obviously Leo, and he was with like Ewan McGregor and Dakota Fanning, a whole bunch of people. But you can see the crowds that are coming just to catch a glimpse. So this chapter 5 isn't exactly a film festival as Jesus is hanging out on the mountainside, right? There's no movie showing. But there is something magnetic about who Jesus is and about the way he's teaching and leading people that is becoming known. And people are gathering and flocking and coming. And it's not because he's famous in a rich and I got this all covered kind of way, but there is something amazing that is happening through his teaching and at the beginning of his earthly ministry. That's what's kind of prompting these large crowds to start gathering. And so Jesus just notes the reality of what's happening around him, and he takes advantage of the opportunity to teach the people. Can I just pause here? I meant to do this in the beginning, but I would like to just welcome, Alex's parents are here from England, Simon and Rosemary. And Simon is, let me get this right, a rector with the Church of England. Is that the right title? Which is like the pastor, which means word of our heresy is spread across the ocean, and they're here to check in on us. But I just want to acknowledge and welcome you guys. I think you've maybe win the prize for who's come the furthest this morning. So I meant to welcome you earlier, but glad to have you guys with us. And yeah. So that's kind of what's happening as Jesus is here, the crowds are gathering. And so when I was thinking, what should we start on to begin our fall together, I thought, well, let's read a passage from maybe the best sermon that's ever been given. That seems like a good place to start. So Matthew chapter 5, I would say, is this best teaching sermon Jesus ever gave. And we're going to look at it as a church in the months or years, or whenever we get there. We will come back to this and look at it in detail. But if you can, jump ahead to verse 14. And this is where the hook I want to leave us with. Verse 14 says this: "You're the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." So if you're comfortable, I want to read it again, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Sometimes we get so distracted trying to look and follow along. I just want you to listen. And just pay attention to these words and what pops up. So if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Let me read it again for you. "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." And maybe this makes you feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to read it one more time. "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." So another thing that happened when we went to this Bonkers store is that they had all kinds of different candy and games and crafts and that putty stuff that kids love. I forget what that's called. Silly putty. It's really advanced since we had silly putty. Like, it's magnetic and glows in the dark and all these crazy things. I forget what it's called. But they have all this stuff. What's that stuff called, Si? That putty? Crazy Aaron's putty. Yeah. See? You didn't know that. See? We did not have that. So they have all these things there. But one thing they did on like the card rack or the book rack, they had books about year in review. So you could look at whatever year you were born and then find out really interesting things that happened that year. And so for curiosity's sake, I thought I'll grab 1976, that's my birth year, and see what happened in that year. And so let me share a few things from 1976. So this is, some of these stats are based in the US, but the average income in the US in 1976 was $16,000. The average cost to buy a brand new home was $43,000. The average rental of a house was $220 a month. Gas price, it was 59 cents a gallon, which if my math is right, oh, I typed it wrong. I think it's like 5.6 cents a liter, something like that. The movie Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, that came out in 1976, it was big. The most popular TV show was Happy Days. Apple Computer started in 1976. That's when they first got started. CN Tower opened its doors for the very first time, 1976. And a very different prime minister, also named Trudeau, was in charge of our country then. That's crazy, eh? It's a trip. There was also this game that, well, kind of a game, kind of a craft. I'm not sure what class it goes into. It was launched in the late 60s, but it gained huge popularity through the 70s. So much so that even though I was born in 1976, it was still popular through the 70s and even into the 80s. And it was this thing called Light Bright. So there's a lot of people maybe who feel like, I have no idea what that is, and it looks like a wreck. Like, these are the crappy toys we played with right here. So when our kids complain about being bored, I feel like I wish I could whip one of these out of the closet and be like, 2 hours on the clock. Knock yourself out. But we got ours from a garage sale. And so let me explain, because there may be people who have no idea what the deal is. This is how advanced our games were. So there is a light bulb in the back of this thing, and you put a piece of black paper on it, and then with the colored beads, as you punch holes, they start glowing. And so you create these pictures. And some of them had like a stencil on them. So in this case, that ship was probably a stencil, and so you could follow along in a different sort of paint by numbers kind of way, and you'd have this beautiful picture. And you could see the kids are having like endless hours of enjoyment here. I love it. So we got ours from a garage sale, and as terrible as this sounds, we were so excited to get this light bright. Like we couldn't believe, like it sounds so pathetic right now. But anyways, we got this light bright, and we used to play with it, and my mom would complain that those colored pegs would be all over the house, but we used to like create and do some I thought really great things with it. And so that was a big toy. It came out in the late 60s, continued through the 70s, and we probably got it in the early 80s. So it had a real long shelf life in terms of a toy that now garage sale means it's probably on its way out, but for the Vincent family, that was like brand new, cutting edge. So we got the old light bright. It was amazing. And this will all hopefully make sense in a minute. 2 years ago, we got together in our living room with, some of you were there, and many of you weren't. So this was one of the very first times we got together in our living room, and you'll see some familiar faces. Some of them you won't recognize maybe, but we started asking ourselves, what would it look like to maybe plant a church together? And one of the things behind that is that we didn't say, let's plant a church because we just want to plant another church. Let's just be another new thing. But we said we want to have a heart for this, a heart in a way that says, Jesus, we sense you're doing something in us, and as friends, we're trying to respond to that. We're trying to invite others to consider what that looks like. Not just to be another church, but to be ourselves and just be who we are and reimagine what it would look like to be fully bought in and on adventure with Jesus. And we thought, hey, what if we started something new and invited our friends to it? And it was a place that was open for people to ask questions and consider Jesus for the first time. Also for people who are maybe struggling or disengaged with church to give it another chance. People who have maybe been hurt or disenfranchised or frustrated or been away, whatever the case may be. And so this was one of the beginning times in our living room. And I did remember one of my favorite times as more and more people. I remember the first time we put out like some thoughts. Hey, you want to come? Like I didn't even know Megan and Alex really then. And people started coming to these nights where we just said, let's just pray and consider what this could look like. And more people started coming the different weeks we started doing this. I remember at one point, I don't know if it was this night or not, but our friend Dan came, and there was no room. We put every chair we could, like we moved furniture out of the way. So he was sitting kind of back in this section, if that was still part of our house, in the kitchen, where he couldn't even see the living room. And I remember at one point, we still laugh about it, Dan like just shouted out, he's like, hey, Dan from the kitchen with a question. And there's like this really awesome moments of just dreaming together. And each step of the way, this was 2 years ago, we had great times at the Moonshine on Sunday nights down at the little bar. And now this is our second September starting up here. Each time we've done these and taken these steps and invited more people to consider, it's almost like we're these little light bright pegs that are sticking them in this little game and starting to come alive. We're saying, what would it look like for each of us to have our little piece of the puzzle, of the picture, of the journey, and put it in and say we want to be a part of something more than ourselves. And I would really say that, as cheesy as it may be, that is a picture that has stuck out with me over the summer as I've been thinking, what are we trying to do here? What is this all about? What are we doing? And we all maybe have different ideas or motives or thoughts, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But for me, it's part of the idea is that we're coming together as a collective and saying we want to be a part of something that we couldn't do on our own, but because we're motivated by what Jesus is doing in us. And so we're compelled to live, to move, and to act together. And so in this process, we started trying to capture these ideas of, well, what do we think God is doing? And what does it look like, and what are the themes that we're noticing? And so we started trying to capture these and write these things down. We've just called them our culture statements. And so today is really a review and getting everyone up to speed on who we are as a church through these 6 different statements. These are our culture as a church. And so, Joel, if you can flip, let me just walk you through them. And this is what they are. And then I'll explain in a second. So our first one is pupils. This is the culture of apprenticeship. So we are saying that we are committed to engage, establish, equip, and empower people as apprentices of Jesus, as followers of Jesus, as people who want to learn from Jesus' teaching and his example, apply those things into our life, and be transformed and changed in this relationship with Jesus. That's what we're saying we want to be. That's kind of an individual statement. As pupils with other pupils, we're committed to follow Jesus. Our second one is people. As we're individually choosing to follow Jesus, we also know, and we see the example in Scripture, that it's really, really important to be together. And so this is people, a culture of table. We open our lives and hearts to one another by choosing relationship and creating space. And we know that you have to choose relationship. Because if you don't choose to go deeper and you don't choose to open yourself, all you're left with is the how is the weather kind of conversations and level of relationship with each other. So there's a choice to be vulnerable and to push forward. And so we do this, our midweek groups, we'll talk about this in the weeks to come, are really our place where we'd say, as people together, we gather around the table, we share meals, we learn, we talk about each other's weeks, we pray together, and we invite people in. We always have this heart to say there has to be empty room, empty chairs at the table so that anyone could show up, whether they're hungry and they just need a meal, whether they're just lonely and they need some friends, whatever, there always has to be empty spaces at the table. So that's that one. The next one, partygoers. This is a culture of celebration. We choose to passionately celebrate God and people. So one of the things we started noticing as we were hanging out is we started kind of talking about the idea, why when we have a lot of fun and we have a party, we have this circle of people we hang out and do that stuff with. And then why when we talk about the church and following Jesus, we have this group of people. What if these two groups actually started overlapping and everyone was okay to just be themselves? And how about all those passages in the Gospels where Jesus is the one going to the party, bringing the party, changing the water to the wine, being in and among the people? Well, what if we were the people who threw parties? And people are why? What's happening with this party? And it was about a group of people celebrating life and each other and milestones. And that was not only okay, but an intentional part of who we are and where we're going. So we came up with partygoers, peacemakers. This is a culture of reconciliation. We pursue Jesus' way of peace and serve as agents of reconciliation in all things. So sometimes we talk about being peacemakers and we immediately jump to a war situation, but bringing Jesus' peace, his shalom, into everyday life is an ongoing, all the time kind of thing. And sometimes it will be extreme, and sometimes it will just be an interpersonal thing. But we believe that Jesus taught the way of peace and love, and so that needs to be integrated and part of the transformational process we have with Jesus. And so we want to talk about what it means to be peacemakers. The next one, pioneers. This is a culture of adventure and innovation. We openly consider and pursue creative new ideas that contribute to our shared sense of mission. So as we were starting something new, we thought it's going to be really important for us to bake in right away this sense of adventure and innovation. Because sometimes once you're far enough down the road, it's hard to then talk about, well, how do we change and mix it up and go for new things? So let's just, as a new thing, let's just say we want to honor new things and celebrate new things and try new things. And so we have this adventure and innovation statement. And our last one is planters, a culture of multiplication. We dedicate ourselves to natural, healthy growth and expansion while embracing intentional, ongoing relationship. And so as we were planting and starting this new church, we said, let's just be crazy, and let's say that we also want to keep planting churches and raising up leaders and planting churches and raising leaders and planting churches. Now, we don't have that figured out in any way, but declaring something and working towards something changes the way and the trajectory you're on. And so if we say we want to do these things, then you start being more conscious of it, and you start looking for those opportunities, and you start making decisions that allow you to get to that place. And it's not so much of we can celebrate only when we get there. Hey, we did it. The celebration and the faithfulness is throughout the whole journey. It's ongoing choices that we make. And so these are our culture statements that tried to capture what God was doing in us, what it meant to be the light in our city and our communities. And so what we're going to do this fall is we are going to take time every week to look at different culture statements. But I didn't want it to be about me just talking about it. I wanted to always put flesh on the idea. So I've invited a series of people to come and be guests. Some are internal reunion folks, and some are friends just a step or two removed, to come and to talk to us about what it means as what I would say they live out of that value, that culture statement. Does that make sense? So I'm going to run down some of the list of people we have coming. So next, and it's going to be out of order from what we just talked about. So Ali and Zoe, lots of you guys will know they're in this country duo band called the Lovelocks that they're blowing up. They're playing all over. It's been amazing. They're both good friends and passionate followers of Jesus. And so I've invited Ali and Zoe to come to talk about what it means to be Jesus in an environment that is always just about the party. So what does it look like to faithfully follow Jesus in an environment that's fun, party celebration, which is great, but also for them to be motivated and in tune with something that's beyond that. That isn't the destination, that there's a deeper purpose. And so it's great. They're going to come hang out with us next week, and I'll set us up, and then we're going to kind of do an interview, and you can ask questions. I haven't heard if they're going to sing or do anything, but they've been around us for a while. Allie's husband, Brian, works with a church in Toronto, so they're in downtown Toronto. And Zoe and Mark, her husband Mark, have been in and out of here, but their travel schedule is kind of nuts. But anyways, I'm super excited that Allie and Zoe are going to be here. They're going to talk about being partygoers. After that, Daryl Winger, some of you will know. So Daryl was on staff at the Meeting House back in 2006 and 7 when I first got hired by the Meeting House. So he's been one of those voices in my life that has had real influence. And he would probably underplay all that and not think. You know, sometimes when you feel someone has made such an impact in your life, but they don't think they have. I think sometimes that's how Daryl approaches it. Like, I'm gushing about the things that I've learned from him, and he seems oblivious to like, oh, really? I don't think I have anything to offer. But he does. He has so much to offer. And so Daryl's going to speak to us about what it means to be an apprentice of Jesus and talk about his journey, his ups and downs, struggles, things he's learned, and just to be honest about kind of his journey. And then we are going to spend a week where we're going to talk about this culture of table. And so we're going to have some midweek people who are involved in our midweek groups last year be a part of this panel to share their experience. Because sometimes when people think, oh, do I want to jump in for like a weekly dinner group? They're like, I don't want anything to do with that. So we're hoping to break down some of the barriers by just letting some people from here share their experience last year with the midweek group. And then that will be the precursor to launching a lot of our groups coming up in the next few weeks. Then some of you will know Sean. He started the Burgers Priest, which he started with one kind of burger shop on Queen Street East, put all of his money into it. He was a graduate from Tyndale, he went to seminary, thought he was going to go into some kind of church leadership, but he's always had this passion for food and specifically burgers, and so he went this way and started this burger joint called the Burgers Priest, and it's blown up, it's all over the place. How many people have eaten at the Burgers Priest? Okay, so it's amazing, it's incredible. And so Sean is going to come and talk about his journey with Jesus and talk to us a little bit about what it means to be a pioneer for adventure and innovation and going after, having a sense of, I think God is leading me this way, what would it look like to just go for it. And so we're excited that Sean will be with us in a few weeks. And if we can just decide, I think it would be really awesome to all go out for lunch to the Burgers Priest afterwards if you're free and available. I think the closest one is probably Port Credit. I think that might be our closest one. So maybe we'll do that the week Sean's here. I'll see if I wonder if we could get a deal or something. I'm not sure. It's not exactly the cheapest burger place. I'll just say that. The burgers are good, the fries are iffy. I'll talk to him about that too. Anyways, some of you all know Matt Morales. He is, I got to know him over the last number of years through he's involved as a leader at the Meeting House, leading a home church. But Matt is going and just started peace studies at Conrad Grable in Waterloo. And he's intentionally going to study what it means to be an advocate for peace and reconciliation. And so he's doing a master's degree in that. And so I wanted to invite Matt to come and talk about why he would choose to pursue this path educationally, but also how it's transforming his life and his relationships. And he's kind of soft-spoken, but I think we can get him going. And really excited that Maddie will be with us later. And then a lot of you will know Hester on the left, and this is her fiance, actually, Neil. Hester and her family, they're from South Africa. They started a global initiative called God's Work Foundation. And so this is another one. This is a second kind of pioneer adventure and innovation. Sean will be kind of a local conversation, and this is more of a global conversation. And so they're involved in Southern Africa with planting churches, starting a well program so people have fresh water. They do all kinds of stuff. I don't want to try to represent and know what. Anyways, I invited Hester to come, share that journey. And I don't know how long Hester will be with us. Her husband Neil has a heart for church leadership, and so they're looking for new opportunities together as a couple. So they may not be here much longer. But their work, I thought it'd be a great conversation to have Hester and Neil here. Neil was working for the foundation, and that's how they met. So careful where you work, I guess, is one of the takeaways. And then we want to spend 1 week just talking about us and this pursuit of planting churches. Because I have some updates to share. There's some things that are bubbling and happening underneath the surface that I think are really scary and exciting. And sometimes it's weird when you sense, I think we're going this way, but you also are honest that, but I don't really know what we're doing here, right? We're still figuring out who we are, and it can be kind of scary to think, but all these things are happening too, where people are now looking to us. So we have to put on our big boy and girl pants, pull them up, and be ready to see where God's leading us. But I'm really excited about that part of our conversation too. And then there may be some other guests. I still have a few requests out. So we're just going to take our time and talk about it and put flesh on these ideas and ask questions. There's always going to be an open time for you to ask any questions you want. And try to take it from a theoretical statement to a personal application and see how you're inspired. We're all wired in different ways. Probably one of these statements stands out to you more than others. One you may resonate with, like, yeah, I got that, it's easy, and another one may be, if you're honest with yourself, more of a struggle to think of how do you apply that into your life. So here's what I want to do. Every time we're together, we always want to take some time just to chat together. So we're just going to get you to turn at your tables and to talk for a couple minutes together. If you don't like that idea, you can go to the washroom or grab a coffee or get out your phone. That's the sign of I'm not interested in talking publicly, which is fine. But I'd love you to talk about this idea, and specifically this. Is there one of these statements or ideas that you feel most excited about? What would that be? Is there a sense of expectation you're bringing into this season? And what is that sense of expectation? Or if you really are going to feel comfortable and want to be honest, what are you wrestling and struggling with that as we talk about this new season together as a church that you're really not buying it and you're not really sure about it? It's okay to admit that too. And so we're going to talk about that at your table for a couple minutes, and then I'll call you back together, and then I have a few other thoughts, okay? So why don't you have a conversation? And it's important for us to hear from each other, so it's okay to be real and honest and then to feed that back to me, okay? Go for it. It's good. I think it'll be really great in the weeks to come to talk about these values, how they continue to shape us as a church. And for us to say, are they hard and fast forever and ever? I think it's okay to say no. It's okay for us to say, this is who we think. Let me rephrase that. It's okay to acknowledge that we think these are the things that God has used to shape us, and we've paid attention to those. But there could be other things or changes or shifts that happen to us because we are living community together, discovering and following Jesus together. So things may happen and shift and change, and that's okay. That's just part of acknowledging what God is doing. When we talk about this idea of from Matthew 5 about shining and letting your good deeds be an example, it's this idea that as Jesus changes us and transforms us, that we are then, because of the loving relationships and the transformational relationship we have with Jesus personally, it then compels us then to act. It compels us to love and to care and to serve and to give our life. As we experience this with God ourselves, it kind of catapults us into this lifestyle of loving and caring for others. I think one of the hard things, though, can be to say, well, what difference can I really make? Like, what is really the big deal, right? So if we go back to the light bright idea, if we're just like this one little peg, there's this huge black screen blocking out the light, and we put our little peg in the hole and we light up, it's not really going to illuminate much of anything. It doesn't paint a picture. It's not necessarily beautiful. It's not one of those stories you just want to tell on and on and on that everyone's talking about. So sometimes I think what happens is, unless we know we can paint this huge big picture, that we keep our light to ourselves. And we're like, I'm better just to hang on to my piece because it's safer, I don't have to extend myself, I'm not being vulnerable. I'll keep that back, rather than saying, what if we put it in and see what God does? So as I've been praying this summer, one of the things I've been praying most about is that we all collectively would be willing to take our little light and place it together, and that we would trust that God would create something beautiful out of all of us together. Because this whole journey is about relationship. Jesus initiates relationship with us, welcomes us, invites us into relationship, and as we choose to follow Jesus, as we experience the love of God, we recognize, oh, we're born and made for each other. That for me to truly discover who I'm supposed to be, I need other people around the table. That for me to discover what's next for me, I need to have other people who know me deeply be able to say, Matt, hey, what about that? Or what about this? Or I see that in you. Right? It's that idea we keep saying that for us to discover who we are as a church, we have the mentality that we need the next person to join the table so that we can discover it together. We won't just maybe necessarily find it on our own, but the next person helps us unlock the next piece of the puzzle, the next part of the picture as this beautiful tapestry is being woven together by God. And so it made me think about this. I know this light bright thing I'm stuck on, but I can't get rid of it. Because I also came across this picture. of this light bright Jedi master. So he looks really serious about his light bright artwork. But I think it is a good mental hook for us. I think it's a really cool mental hook. When we have the tiny little light bright screen and we feel like it's a blank page and we put our one little light in it, it feels lonely and what could God ever do with us, and this won't really amount to much. So I'll pull it back out and it won't be used in any way. But what if we knew that as we place our piece in and our friends place their pieces in, that maybe God helps us create something beautiful that feels like a masterpiece? And what if we don't judge our masterpiece by what our culture and our world tells us is a successful masterpiece? What if our view of that is simply that we become more loving, more welcoming, more like Jesus? Then that itself is the win. But to do that, we need each other. So my prayer this year is that we would stumble into this, at least with an openness to consider what it would look like for us to shine as light, to be agents of peace and hope and love and reconciliation to our city and to our friendships and our workplaces, and see what God has. Invite them, our friends, into the conversation and trust that God is already at work all around us. One of the biggest learnings we've had as a church so far is that as we take steps that we feel are scary, we realize that God has been so far out in front of us this whole time. So we're kind of putting up our hand in a timid way, like, God, could you maybe do something? And then we realize other hands are popping up that we had no idea about. Seeing Kyle here this morning, I remember last year in September when we showed up here, Kyle and his wife, Kayla, came with Tyrone and Danny, and I only kind of knew Tyrone, and they walked in and they said, hey, we saw it online, we thought we'd jump in and be a part of it. Now I can't imagine Kyle not being a part of our family. It's of course it's right. And so this fall I've been excited to think of, as we're putting up our hand again here at the Performing Arts Center for another season, who are those other people that are like, hey, we want to be a part of that? And together we discover what God has for us. And we create this picture, this light that people can't help but be curious about. So I want to give you a moment just to be quiet. I just want you to think and just consider, what does it look like for you to shine? How are you positioned to be a light? Think of your current place, your current workplace, school environment, family, friendship circles. How are you placed, even right now, to be a light? And what would it look like for you just to kind of start dreaming and glowing and imagining together? So as you consider that, I also want to say that if you're not sure about Jesus, that's totally okay. It's really okay for you to be here. We're so glad. We think those conversations as we wrestle together with ideas about faith and life, it's so important for all these perspectives to be here. So if you're not really sure about Jesus, but you're open to the conversation, maybe just say, what would it look like for you to become a more true and authentic version of yourself? How do you really be more of who you are? And that's even a really good question to ask yourself. And as we're quiet, Justin and the team are going to come and we're going to start singing again. And then Mark and Meg are going to come and serve communion. We have communion every week together, and it's a reminder for us of what holds us together as spiritual family. So we take pieces of the bread that represent Jesus' broken body, we take the grape juice and we dip the bread in, and we realize that through Jesus' sacrifice and the way he extended himself in love, we now have meaning and identity. And it's an open table. If you want to come, if you have chosen to follow Jesus, or maybe today for the first time saying, I'm choosing to follow Jesus, then you're welcome just to come up, and they'd love to serve you. If you don't want to, that's okay, and we're going to sing a little bit, and then we'll move into just the close. So just take a minute and just reflect and be quiet and see if God is saying something to you. What does it look like for you to become a light in the place you're already positioned? So just take a moment. So God, as we were just reflecting and as we sing, as we finish this time together, again, with that same heart of openness, we just want to listen. And so in the busy culture we live in, where we're always into the next thing, we want to try to shut out some things and say, God, what are you saying? And if we're not sure if there is a God, we also want to say, God, reveal yourself to us. Are you real? That we would sense a stirring in our spirit, a warming in our spirit, that there is something going on. Help us to listen and pay attention. God, we wait on you.